to Perf Pod, your go-to podcast for everything related to performance management. Whether you're a student or a seasoned professional, you'll find valuable insights and updates here. Perf Pod episodes will be short, snappy, and are particularly targeted at ACCA students studying for performance management or advanced performance management exams. They include technical content, exam techniques, and real-world applications, giving you the best chance to pass these two tricky exams. I'm your host, Richard Guyver, also known as the Dentist Accountant, and today we're diving into risk and attitudes to risk, which is mainly from the PM syllabus but does come up in APM from time to time. First we'll look at risk and uncertainty, and then we'll look at attitudes to risk. Risk and uncertainty, they're both key concepts in decision making and planning, and both involve the unknown. However, they differ in how well we can predict outcomes. Often the two terms are confused, and that's probably because in normal life they're often used interchangeably, but they are different and they have specific definitions in ACCA, particularly in performance management. Risk. One way to look at risk is we're looking at an event that may or may not occur. Now that's true with uncertainty. They both look at events that may or may not occur. The difference is with risk, the probability and impact of that can be calculated statistically, whereas with uncertainty, the outcome cannot be predicted. So just to clarify, they both deal with events which may or may not occur in the future. With risk, we can predict statistically the probability and the impact, whereas with uncertainty, we cannot. It's also worth remembering that they're not necessarily negative. They can be positive outcomes. So uncertainty and risk can lead to a better outcome than we expected, or a worse outcome. How to remember the difference? There's different ways, but I think maybe one way to think about is with uncertainty, you're uncertain about the outcome, and risk, you're not uncertain about the outcome. Might be worth thinking of an example. A good example often heard is around an ice cream seller. Let's say on a sunny day they know they'll sell 1,000 ice creams, but if it rains they'll only sell 10% or 100 ice creams. The risk there is that it rains, but because they've been in business for a number of years, they know what happens when it rains. They know they only sell 10% of the ice creams that they'd sell when it was sunny. If you think of the entire insurance industry, that's built on risk and statistical chance. So anyone who's taken out car insurance or house insurance will know there's a load of questions that are asked about job, where you live, perhaps previous claims, etc., etc. All of those lead to a statistical appraisal on your risk of needing to make a claim, and that's what predicts your premium. With uncertainty, that's more comes into play when you're thinking of perhaps a new product launch. If you're launching a new technology or a new product, there is no data to go on. You don't know how the market's going to react. You don't know what your competitors are going to do. So that's where uncertainty comes in. Now, if we think a bit more about risk, there are different attitudes to risk, and there are three main ones that are mentioned in both PM and APM. There's the risk seeker. The risk seeker, they want the highest reward, even if there's a small chance of that occurring. And the typically sort of gamblers and often venture capitalists are put in this category. Risk neutral people, they look for the most likely outcome, so they're taking more of a balanced approach. And then risk averse, so the opposite of risk seekers, they're looking to minimize losses. Now in performance management, those attitudes to risk are normally quite clear what the examiner's talking about. They may even give them those exact terms: risk seeker, risk neutral, risk averse. In advanced performance management, they may be generous and give you the actual terms, although they may be a bit more subtle. For example, they may talk about a past behaviour of a group of people, and from that you've got to work out, are they a risk seeker, risk neutral or risk averse. So be sure to, when you're reading an APM question, to look for those hints, those subtleties in the question. And so that's the risk attitudes to risk. And now uncertainty. When there's uncertainty, there's ways of making the situation better. Because we don't know what's going to happen, we can look to try and get information, data that helps reduce that uncertainty. And the obvious ways are things like market research, perhaps focus groups. And if we loop back to the example I gave earlier about launching a new product, before launching a new product, you could go out to the market and see if people are interested, get their feedback, perhaps even try and sell it before it's made. And that way you're reducing uncertainty. There is still uncertainty, but you're reducing it. So we've had a quick look here at risk and uncertainty and attitudes to risk. The next couple of podcasts are going to stay on a very similar subject. We're going to look at how those attitudes to risk lead to different decision making. Again, that will be a PM topic, but it does come up in APM. That's a summary of risk, uncertainty, and attitudes to risk. So thanks for tuning into PervPod. I hope you found this episode informative, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave your feedback, and especially if you have any topics you want me to record a future podcast on, please say so in the feedback. And if you've got any colleagues who you think might find this useful, please share a link to this podcast with them. Until next time, this is PervPod signing off.